The girl was cursed by a demon. She would die tragically at her husband's hands, within a year of marriage. But having grown up in an orphanage, she desperately yearned for someone's love. So when an old man 20 years elder than her promised to give her a home, Rosen accepted without hesitation. Sure enough, the curse came true. Less than a year into their marriage, she suffered daily beatings from her husband. To break free from the curse, the girl finally stabbed her husband multiple times, successfully killing him, and Rosen was subsequently arrested and imprisoned. Unexpectedly, within 3 months of imprisonment, she successfully tricked the prison guard into giving her the keys, using her silver tongue. But she was caught again a year later. This time Rosen created a legend. Using nothing but a dining spoon, she escaped again. However, she was captured again 6 months after her escape. As punishment, the court specifically changed her 50-year sentence to life imprisonment. To prevent her from escaping again, the Empire specially dispatched the renowned war hero Ian to transport her to the most severe Monter Island prison, where it said not even a fly could escape. After all, Rosen's 2 prison breaks had already severely trampled on the Empire's military pride. The stern and impartial Ian immediately interrogated Rosen, but Rosen claimed she had never killed anyone. How could Ian possibly believe that? He had heard this woman was a pathological liar, telling 11 lies out of every 10 sentences. Just as he was about to continue questioning, the door was suddenly violently thrown open. A yellow-haired man shouted loudly to stop. Both were startled by the sudden intrusion. Rosen almost bit her tongue off. The yellow-haired man then embarrassedly explained, "Commander, I was just worried about you. You know this woman is a level 1 criminal. She stabbed her husband 36 times back then." Rosen collapsed upon hearing this, now trembling with anger. "I never hurt my husband. It was robbers who were jealous of her. You must not have investigated properly." As she spoke, she burst into tears, but her tears didn't earn any sympathy from Ian. Ian even warned her to stop performing. Such acting was truly amateur. Unexpectedly, Rosen's face changed instantly. "Well, I shouldn't have cried then, just wasted my tears." This was Ian's first encounter with such an unusual criminal. His competitive spirit secretly vowed. This time he absolutely couldn't let this woman escape from his custody. He then ordered the yellow-haired man to secure the prisoner. He wanted to take Rosen somewhere else. However, Rosen was someone who had seen much of the world. She didn't even bother to resist. Having escaped twice, she already understood. The relationship between prisoners and guards was like cat and mouse, and she was the craftiest mouse. It turned out Rosen had already noticed the keys at Ian's waist when he wasn't paying attention. This strengthened her belief that she could escape. Meanwhile, the yellow-haired man was in a difficult position, because there were many nobles on this ship. He worried that if these people saw a level 1 criminal, it would cause unnecessary panic. After all, the story of Rosen brutally killing her husband had spread far and wide. People firmly believed she was the most terrifying witch of Alcatraz. Moreover, the yellow-haired man thought Rosen smelled terrible, worse than corpses on the battlefield. Being insulted to her face, Rosen was furious and was about to snap back, but suddenly heard Ian apologizing to her on behalf of the yellow-haired man. Rosen's mood gradually calmed down, but the next moment she was taken to the deck. Looking at the vast ocean before her, she couldn't help but feel afraid. This guy wasn't planning to drown her in the sea, was he? Unexpectedly, he started making casual conversation with her. "Did you really escape with just a spoon? Everyone says you're a witch who used evil magic, because the last successful prison break was by a witch 36 years ago." Rosen found this utterly ridiculous. "If I were really a witch, you wouldn't have been able to catch me. And I certainly wouldn't be bound by these worthless shackles now." The yellow-haired man quickly added, "Sir, you must not believe anything the witch says." Rosen was finally provoked. "I really want to sew that foul-smelling mouth of yours shut." Seeing the yellow-haired man grinding his teeth in anger, Ian not only didn't take his side, but warned him not to get emotional without reason, then ordered him to bring what he had requested. When only the two of them remained, Ian's expression became colder and more serious. "Whether you're a witch or not doesn't matter to me. You just need to know that this time you won't escape." Rosen was confused. This was the first time someone had said such things to her. What was this guy up to? Just then the yellow-haired man brought a large basin of mysterious substance. Rosen looked closely and saw it was raw meat. Before she could figure out what they were planning, Ian suddenly dumped the raw meat into the sea. He wanted to show her just how cruel the creatures in these waters could be. Suddenly there was a huge splash in the sea. The raw meat was instantly devoured by the sea creatures. At this moment Rosen despaired, because this meant her plan to escape through the sea was completely ruined. The yellow-haired man was delighted. "See that, witch? Those are all big creatures in there." However, Rosen didn't want to say a word at this point. Suddenly Ian deliberately walked up to her with the keys. "I know you want these keys, but unfortunately I can't give them to you." Rosen finally realized. The man before her was nothing like in the posters. It turned out that long ago, Rosen had seen Ian's image in posters. Back then he was the greatest war hero in Rosen's heart. She even considered him her idol. Who would have thought the real Ian would be such a cold-hearted person? Back in the ship's prison cell, her fellow prisoner Maria started gossiping. She was convinced Ian had told Rosen some secret. Rosen then told her everything that had happened. Unexpectedly, Maria laughed at Rosen after hearing it. "Don't you think Ian just needs a woman? You could do this and that with him." Rosen irritably covered her ears. Just thinking about those huge monsters in the sea made Rosen inexplicably fearful. Maria seemed to realize something and suddenly grabbed Rosen's shoulders. "You're not planning to give up on escaping, are you?" Looking at Maria's fierce eyes, Rosen couldn't help but recall when they first met. Back then Maria was also serving time in Alcatraz prison. She had supreme authority in the prison cell. Anyone Maria didn't like usually died within 3 days in prison. Fortunately, Rosen and Maria got along well. When she was digging the tunnel with a spoon back then, Maria had specifically reminded her to be careful not to let the guards hear. At the time Rosen didn't understand why she always looked after her. Now she understood. Those prisoners yearning for freedom were waiting for her success. She carried their hopes for freedom, maintaining their deepest desires. Thinking of this, Rosen firmly replied, "I absolutely won't give up." Maria finally smiled with satisfaction and rewarded Rosen with a $1,000 cigar. The two chatted casually. They naturally started talking about Ian. Rosen really couldn't understand how such an excellent pilot would end up being responsible for transporting prisoners. But none of that mattered. What was most important now was how to figure out a way to get the keys from Ian. But exactly how to do it, Rosen didn't have a complete plan yet. What was more troubling was, even if she successfully got the keys, those monsters in the water would be quite difficult to deal with. Even if she could get on a boat, there was a high chance she would starve to death at sea. The more Rosen thought about it, the more she felt the odds were against her. A sudden gurgling sound irritated Rosen, but when she saw what it was, she froze. It turned out to be a 3-year-old girl playing with a ball. Maria then told Rosen that the earlier cigar was also from this little girl. Rosen found it unbelievable, but thinking the ship's bottom was dangerous, she went forward to tell the little girl to leave. Unexpectedly, the little girl adorably ran towards Rosen and introduced herself proactively. "Hello, I'm Layla Leeville." When Rosen heard this surname, she immediately thought of that annoying yellow-haired Henry Leeville. Sure enough, she soon learned, this little girl was that yellow hair's niece. That yellow hair really is an idiot. Can't even watch a child. Fortunately, this little girl wasn't as stupid as her uncle. Then the girl told Rosen that she came here to find the witch Rosen and expressed that she admired her and that her grandfather was the captain, so she could move freely around the ship. Rosen quickly realized this little girl had quite a powerful background. Perhaps she would know some secrets about Ian. Then Rosen promised Layla, if she could answer her questions, she would perform magic in front of her. After a moment's hesitation, the innocent Layla quickly agreed. Rosen didn't beat around the bush, asking directly, "Do you know Ian?" Through the girl's answers, Rosen quickly learned that Ian was pure-hearted, but naturally cold. And he had one problem, which was that he didn't want to marry. Rosen specifically asked Layla whether Ian was a sympathetic person. After all, the answer to this question would determine what strategy she would use to escape. Unfortunately, based on Layla's years of experience with Ian had never been a soft-hearted person. Rosen never expected this 3-year-old girl would provide so much useful information, and she prepared to fulfill her earlier promise, performing magic in front of Layla. Then Rosen took a coin from Layla's hand. Something magical happened. The coin that was in her palm 1 second ago suddenly disappeared in the blink of an eye. Layla was extremely excited, but then Rosen just turned her palm over, and the coin magically appeared again. Rosen finally returned the coin to Layla, and specifically mentioned, "This coin will turn to gold before sunset. But you can't tell anyone about this." Clever Rosen worried that if Ian found out about her asking about him, it might cause unnecessary trouble. After Layla left, Maria rolled her eyes dismissively. "Were you really performing magic just now?" Rosen responded carelessly. "That child was just easy to trick." Maria couldn't help but tease her. "You really are a master of lies. Why don't you go to Ian and have a try? Maybe you'll have a chance to escape." Actually, Rosen had thought about using lies and playing pitiful to gain Ian's sympathy. But from what she could see, this method wouldn't work with Ian. Ian was never such a foolish person. The famous Commander Ian, who in the Empire hadn't heard of him, he had been an excellent soldier, pilot, and also a famous war hero. But looking at Rosen herself, she was exactly the opposite. She was a nationally notorious murderer. a rat that everyone wanted to beat. But Rosen still had to escape. She absolutely wouldn't allow herself to spend her miserable life in prison. Suddenly a new idea sprouted in Rosen's mind. Since the sympathy route wouldn't work, then let Ian taste the feeling of conquest. After all, few men could resist such feelings. More crucially, satisfying his desire for conquest would be simpler. At this moment, Ian, who was being plotted against by Rosen, sneezed involuntarily, while Yellowhair complained about the task of escorting the witch. Really unlucky to end up with the task of transporting a witch. Ian also couldn't help but grumble. They had finally won the war, but now people were treating visiting the prison island as entertainment. It turned out that after the war ended, many things had changed. Even the military supply ships had been converted for civilian use. This steamship that once carried countless traces of gunpowder was now replaced by luxurious parties and joy, becoming a tourist ship, and the destination was precisely Monter Island, where criminals were imprisoned. More ridiculous was that they allowed level 1 prisoners and tourists on the same ship. Ian didn't know if this was lucky for the prisoners or tragic for the tourists. Suddenly Ian unconsciously thought of Rosen. He remembered that the witch who appeared 36 years ago came from Liaton, and now Rosen was also born there. Such coincidence made Ian more suspicious. Could that woman really be a witch? Yellowhair noticed from the side that Ian seemed particularly interested in that murderer, even interrogating her separately. Ian had to explain, because Liaton was also where he grew up. His first flight was also there, so when Liaton was mentioned, it was inevitably different. Ian couldn't help but sigh. That woman was really extremely lucky. When war broke out in Liaton, she had escaped prison and avoided catastrophe. But unfortunately, she was about to be sent to Monter Island. That was the most strictly guarded prison in the entire empire. No matter how capable someone was, they couldn't leave there alive. Somehow, Yellowhair suddenly broke down and shouted, "At least she's still alive," while many of their comrades and relatives had already died in the war. Ian knew Yellowhair was having an episode again. Since the war ended, Yellowhair would often become emotionally agitated when thinking about the uncontrolled scenes of war, and all Ian could do was quietly accompany him until he had vented his emotions completely. As Yellowhair gradually regained his rationality, he began complaining on Ian's behalf. How could the Empire have a war hero escort a witch? But Ian stated that a soldier's duty was to follow orders. Then you'll return to your post after completing this mission, right? Ian was left speechless by this question. Because there were many people in the Empire who disliked him, he knew this assignment was due to those people. He truly didn't know if he would have the chance to be a soldier again. Moreover, this escort mission itself was a thankless task. If she escaped, he would certainly bear inescapable responsibility. If he successfully delivered the witch to Monter Island, people would surely take the opportunity to mock him, saying he was well suited for escorting prisoners and might be assigned such tasks in the future. Yellowhair could only sigh helplessly and comfort him. No matter what, your future is still a bright road ahead. But Ian fell into deep thought again. Did he really still have a bright road ahead? Actually, it wasn't until after the war ended, when crowds of people were shouting his name, that Ian realized this wasn't what he wanted. Thinking of those lives lost by his hand, thinking of those comrades who gave everything for the war, he didn't know what expression to wear when facing people. Ian certainly knew war was cruel. He couldn't protect everyone, but he just couldn't help feeling guilty. Seeing Ian's expression growing darker, Yellowhair thought he was worried about the witch, then righteously stated, "Don't worry about the witch, I'll watch her constantly." Unexpectedly, Ian shot back, "You better focus on treating your psychological illness." For a moment, Yellowhair was very angry, but still held back his anger to comfort Ian. "None of this was your fault. If it wasn't for you, we would have surely lost the war." But Ian felt that if none of this was his fault, then who was responsible for those civilians' deaths? After all the civilians in Liaton had died. The only survivor was that witch, and now she was to be personally escorted by him to the deadly Monter Island. Thinking of this, Ian summoned Rosen again, but he just stared at her without speaking. Finally, Rosen couldn't stand it. "You call me here but don't speak. What's the meaning of this?" Unexpectedly, Ian started educating Rosen about shark knowledge. Rosen was thoroughly provoked. She stepped forward and knocked Ian's newspaper down. "Enough, you just want to say I can't escape from here, right? Do you really think I'm that stupid?" However, Ian remained calm as usual. Actually, there's just a fine line between fools and heroes, because neither considers consequences. Rosen laughed angrily. "Are you saying I'm brainless?" Ian stated directly, "By my standards, you were a big fool when you escaped." She looked at Ian mockingly and said, "You want me to obediently serve 50 years? That seems like an extremely foolish choice to me. Why don't you teach me what I should do?" Ian's expression didn't change at all. He just told her to confess voluntarily, saying this might reduce her sentence. But Rosen didn't take any of these words to heart. She just wanted to get Ian's attention, so she continued saying, "It's the same crime of killing. Why am I sentenced to 50 years? Simply put, everyone just needs a scapegoat. Whether I actually killed someone doesn't matter at all." Knowing this conversation would yield no results, Ian got up coldly to leave. Rosen instantly panicked. She had to seize this opportunity. Her brain worked rapidly in that moment. Just as Ian was about to step out the door, she shouted provocatively, "In my view, you're a fool just like me. The only difference is you're in the light while I'm in darkness. Everyone thinks you're a hero who won the war, yet so many people still died in the end." Rosen carelessly poked Ian's chest. "You, this so-called hero, are now just escorting prisoners." These words successfully angered Ian. He clenched his fists in rage, then tightly gripped Rosen's neck. A feeling of suffocation invaded Rosen, but she still smiled provocatively. She wanted Ian to lay hands on her. This way she would have a chance to escape. Just as Rosen was secretly rejoicing, the originally angry Ian suddenly released his hand. He coldly moved close to Rosen's face. "If you're trying to provoke me to gain my interest, I suggest you don't waste your effort." At Ian's such quick change in attitude, Rosen felt a chill. She had countless times heard Ian's voice on the radio. Back then she thought it was the most reassuring voice, but now it was colder than ice. Rosen clenched her fists tightly. Perhaps she shouldn't have had any expectations of Ian, but this wouldn't make her give up on escaping. She would surely find another opportunity. On the way back to prison, Henry warned her not to try any tricks. Rosen casually flipped her hair and said carelessly, "Do you know what tricks I want to play? Just those things between men and women." These words made the pure Henry blush. He wanted nothing more than to sew Rosen's mouth shut. Suddenly a girl's figure entered Rosen's vision. It was Layla. She was wandering around the ship alone again, looking at the uncle and niece's same hair color. Rosen's lips couldn't help but curl up. "Your niece seems very cute." These words frightened Henry like a ghost's whisper, his back breaking out in goosebumps. "You'll be dead if you dare touch her." Seeing Henry jumping anxiously, Rosen found it quite amusing. She was just trying to tease this man. Suddenly, the previously happy girl eating candy started trembling, tears streaming down uncontrollably, but she couldn't make a sound. Rosen immediately realized she was choking. She urgently told Henry to save her. But unexpectedly Henry had frozen completely. No matter how much Rosen shook him, he didn't respond. The ship's cabin was empty and silent. It was too remote here. With no choice, Rosen rushed over with her handcuffs and shackles, recalling the life-saving method Emily had once taught her. Based on her fuzzy memory, Layla finally escaped danger. When the little girl hugged her crying, Rosen, her nerves finally relaxed, let out a sigh of relief. She held Layla tightly, feeling the joy after saving someone. Before she hadn't understood why she needed to learn these life-saving things, but now she seemed to understand a bit. Although not everyone can do magic, everyone has times when they need magic. At this moment, heavy footsteps sounded behind her. Rosen thought Henry had finally come to his senses, so she happily sat on the ground, asking Henry for a reward for saving someone. But the person behind remained silent. Turning around in confusion, she found the person was actually Ian. At this time, the captain also arrived, learning that Rosen had saved his precious granddaughter. He was moved to tears. He immediately wanted to thank Rosen, inviting her to tomorrow night's banquet. But Ian disagreed. In his eyes, Rosen wasn't just an unforgivable murderer. She was also an extremely cunning woman. One small oversight and she might escape. He must ensure Rosen was safely delivered to Monter Island. The captain was very angry about this. His sturdy cane slammed on the ground with a bang, followed by an earth-shattering roar. "Ian, you ungrateful bastard. Who taught you to put handcuffs on someone who saved a life?" The imposing manner frightened Rosen's heart. It seemed this captain wasn't ordinary. Her guess was quickly confirmed. The captain took a firm stance, smacking several bumps on Ian's forehead. "Regardless of what status she has with you, right now she's my benefactor." After a beating, Ian was finally forced to compromise. Having settled all this, the captain then gentlemanly introduced himself to Rosen. "Hello, I'm Alex." "What?" Hearing this name, Rosen was so shocked she turned into a Van Gogh abstract painting. The captain was actually a former war hero. The capital had even specially built a unique statue for him. No wonder he could fearlessly discipline Ian. Turns out he was a big shot. With the captain's absolute support, Rosen not only got rid of her handcuffs, but even got to stay in a luxurious princess room, with 3 maids helping her bathe. Lying in the bathtub, Rosen let out a comfortable long sigh. The last time she had a bath was the last time. Just as she was enjoying this rare warmth, suddenly there was noisy commotion outside the door. It was Henry ignoring the maid's obstruction, insisting on entering the bathroom to monitor Rosen, saying this was Ian and and the captain's orders. Just as Henry was about to break in, Rosen wrapped herself in a towel and stormed out angrily. What exactly do you want to do? In an instant the air fell into deathly silence. Henry was scared and immediately covered his eyes. Hey girl, did you forget you're a woman? After calming down, Henry sent everyone else away, saying he had very confidential matters to discuss with Rosen. But Rosen had already seen through Henry's thoughts. She calmly returned to the bathtub, her wet hand carelessly raised. What exactly do you want to tell me? As Ian's deputy, how could he possibly send you to supervise me bathing? This clearly means you have private matters to discuss alone. Seeing his thoughts exposed, Henry no longer concealed it. I came to apologize to you. Through Henry's narrative, Rosen finally understood why he targeted her everywhere. It turned out that when the war started, the enemy forces attacked the capital in two groups. Commander Ian, to protect the capital, had to abandon his hometown Lyaton. Almost no one in the entire town survived, including Henry's innocent sister. Since then he developed post-traumatic stress disorder, and permanently lost the qualification to pilot fighter planes. But what he didn't expect was that Rosen, this murderer, had somehow survived by chance. So Henry was extremely unhappy with her. Why did good people have no right to live, while bad people could roam free? If it wasn't for her saving Layla this time, Henry would probably still hate her. About this, Rosen wasn't surprised at all. No one would investigate who was right or wrong. They just needed someone they could freely blame, and Rosen was that target. Just as Henry was expressing his sincere apology to Rosen, Ian suddenly walked in, his eyes filled with anger, demanding to know what they were doing. From Ian's perspective, the two were doing something inappropriate. Henry stuttered, trying to explain, but was driven out by Ian's angry shout. Then he told Rosen to get dressed and come out. Rosen sat in the chair wrapped in her towel, dumbfounded. Did Ian think she wanted to use Henry to escape? But unexpectedly Ian only asked with concern, did Henry take advantage of you? If she didn't want Henry to continue supervising her, they could change to someone else. Rosen's bright eyes were filled with disbelief, her hands unconsciously gripping her bathrobe tight. Isn't he your deputy? The universally respected great hero. While I'm just a witch despised by everyone. To this, Ian didn't explain much. Everyone has many sides. A good subordinate doesn't mean he has no flaws. These words made Rosen fall into deep thought. She had always thought Ian was a cold-hearted person, yet didn't expect him to be so fair in separating public and private matters. A bright smile spread across her face. You really are a righteous hero. Ian's pupils silently contracted. You also think I'm a hero? Seeing Ian's incredulous expression, Rosen just found it interesting, and her next words shocked Ian even more. I used to have a crush on you. Whenever your photos fell from the sky, I would pick them up and collect them. These words kept circling in Ian's head. You actually collected my photos? Rosen raised a bright smile. Because you're handsome. With these words, the air around them instantly became subtle. Even the usually casual Rosen couldn't help but blush. Goodness, what was she saying? Ian must be very angry now. So she quickly changed the subject. Call the attendants in, I need to change clothes. But Ian showed no reaction. After a pause, he stood up and came to Rosen's front, politely extending his rough, broad hand. I'm not angry, just feeling a bit panicked. Perhaps as Rosen had said before, they weren't essentially different. Rosen, who deliberately killed one person, was called a murderer, while he who had to kill tens of thousands was praised as a hero. If evil could be measured by weight, which of their sins would be heavier? A strange feeling rippled through Ian's heart. He even developed a slight hope for Rosen's success. As a soldier escorting prisoners, this thought was undoubtedly abnormal. But this abnormality wasn't accidental. Every night after the war, Ian would be awakened by nightmares full of planes and gunfire, then endure the long nights alone. He knew something was wrong with him but dared not tell anyone, only because he was a symbol of victory. Looking at Rosen now, he felt somewhat comforted, because she was the only person he had saved. He gently pulled Rosen's hand. Come on, your anticipated banquet is about to begin. Before Rosen could react, Ian pulled her into his arms, and the girl's heartbeat was pounding at this moment. Without reacting, Ian, this complete straight man, actually did a spinning move and directly carried Rosen on his shoulder. Unable to move, Rosen began struggling desperately. Are you treating me like luggage? If you're really afraid I'll escape, just let Henry watch me. Ian's tone remained as detached as ever. I don't trust him now. From now on I'll monitor you personally. Rosen was completely confused. She was just a weak woman who escaped with a spoon. Was it necessary for the commander himself to monitor her? Under Ian's undebatable demands, Rosen finally had to compromise. In the evening, Rosen appeared in public wearing a noble green dress. Her goddess-like beauty stunned everyone. Henry even asked a soul-searching question. Beautiful lady, who might you be? Rosen's face reddened with anger. If you keep talking nonsense, I'll cut out your tongue. Only then did everyone realize this beautiful, charming woman was actually Rosen. Who knew this woman could look somewhat attractive when dressed up? Henry gentlemanly extended an invitation. Beautiful lady, may I escort you into the venue? Looking at it this way, Henry seemed quite handsome too. Rosen was just about to place her hand on his, when a displeased Ian suddenly blocked between them. From now on, you're not allowed near him. Then naturally took Rosen's hand. This prisoner will be under my personal supervision from now on. Looking at the graceful Rosen, Layla excitedly lit up. You look as beautiful as a princess. Being praised by the little cutie, Rosen smiled with eyes curved. But unexpectedly, Ian walked over expressionlessly. Layla, stay away from her, she's a murderer. Rosen instantly felt speechless. Was it necessary to keep emphasizing this point? Well, let's eat first. The captain looked at the heavy handcuffs on Rosen's hands, immediately decided to take them off. But unexpectedly, Ian blocked again. Taking off the handcuffs would risk escape. The captain became furious as thunder, but had no way to help. After all, Rosen was indeed a prisoner. Then let Henry feed her. No way, Ian firmly rejected. Henry isn't reliable now, I'll feed her myself. In that instant, everyone was dumbfounded. The cold and emotionless Commander Ian unexpectedly condescended to feed a female prisoner. Ian naturally took Rosen's hand. Since there's no problem, let's go. Looking at Ian's ever-cold eyes, Rosen somehow felt something was strange. Ian's gaze toward her seemed to have gained a hint of tenderness. Was it her imagination? This thought startled Rosen. How could she expect a military man to have special feelings for a prisoner? So she stopped walking. How long are you going to hold my hand like this? Only then did Ian realize he had been holding a prisoner's hand. He abruptly let go, his cold eyes showing a trace of panic. No, I just wanted to pull the iron chain. Such a clumsy excuse, was the most genuine response to Rosen's ears. She kept telling herself, don't imagine getting anything from Ian. Everything was just her illusion and fantasy. She had indeed harbored girlish hopes and secretly loved Ian before. But now she must wake up. Several people arrived at the venue. The luxurious decorations captivated Rosen. So this was how noble ladies lived. Looking at the delicious food before her, Rosen couldn't help but reach out. But unexpectedly was criticized by Henry. The captain hasn't spoken. How can you start eating first? And the dishes aren't all served yet. How did you eat before? These humiliating words instantly made Rosen's face red. Her fists silently clenched. As an illiterate commoner, how could she know these noble etiquettes? Just as she was awkwardly stuck, Ian gentlemanly handed her a spoon. You can eat if you want to. Meanwhile, sending Henry away from the dining table, I told you not to come near her. Then he tenderly fed Rosen like an old father, having been in prison for so long. This was the first time Rosen had eaten such delicious food. She wanted to stuff all the delicacies into her mouth. Looking at Rosen's hamster-like puffy cheeks, Ian kindly reminded her, eat slowly, don't choke, otherwise throwing up later wouldn't be worth it. Looking at Ian's furrowed brows, Rosen glared impatiently. Could this guy be trying to stop her from eating? Ian replied in a gentle voice, I just want you to eat more slowly, this is just how my face looks. Perhaps frowning had become Ian's habit. Rosen found this somewhat strange. In the past, when faced with these questions, Ian would reflexively ignore them. But now he was consciously talking back. It seemed something was quietly changing. Everyone was chatting happily at the dinner table. Ian curiously asked Rosen, were you a nurse before? That healing technique is something I've rarely seen in the Empire. Or did you use magic? After hearing this, Rosen's lips curled into a mischievous smile. My husband was a traveling doctor. I just learned a few basics from him. While Rosen appeared calm on the surface, her heart was already in turmoil. The real witch was actually Emily. In an instant, the entire dinner table fell silent. To break the awkward atmosphere, the captain spoke first. Pardon me, Miss Rosen, but how old are you? Rosen replied composedly, 26 years old. This left everyone stunned. That would mean she was only 16 when she got married. Henry angrily condemned Rosen's parents. How irresponsible. But Rosen seemed unconcerned. She had been an orphan since childhood. Perhaps her fate was destined to be full of twists and turns. The atmosphere became awkward again. Rosen seemed to have a special talent for killing conversations. Whenever she spoke, everyone would fall silent, seeing everyone's bewildered expressions. She finally decided to keep quiet. The silent Alaray suddenly spoke up dejectedly. Maybe Rosen didn't actually kill her husband. She said she was wrongly accused. Ian replied without changing his expression. Rosen's guilt has been determined by the court. Hearing these words, Alare even burst into tears. Why wouldn't anyone believe Rosen? This feeling of not being trusted was really painful. Ian showed no expression. He turned to ask Rosen, why did you give that coin to Alare? Earlier, when Alare asked Ian to help pick a gift for Rosen, she had given that coin to Ian. Rosen smiled scornfully. What you're really saying is that you just want me to repeat my lies. From beginning to end, everyone thought she was a liar. This point hadn't changed neither before nor now. At this moment, the maid brought new dishes. As Rosen was contemplating what to eat next, a familiar fruit suddenly caught her attention. Her lips curled into a subtle, devious smile. I want to eat the tomato. Ian passed the food to her just like before. At this moment, Rosen's heart began to race, as if she had made some determination. She ate the fruit without hesitation, but unexpectedly within 2 seconds, she began coughing up blood. Her vision gradually became blurred. Then she staggered and fell to the ground. Chaos erupted around her immediately. The sudden situation left everyone at a loss. But Rosen secretly showed a slight smile. It seemed her goal had been achieved. If she hadn't done this, she would surely have been sent back to the dark, damp prison after the banquet. Then it would have been difficult for her to get out again. She had to save herself, even if it meant betting her own life. Looking at the girl lying limp in his arms, Ian was completely panicked. He couldn't let Rosen die like this. Will the only survivor from her hometown die by her own hands? And all of this was planned by the female prisoner. She once almost died from a tomato allergy. This time it was just to gain more sympathy, to avoid being sent back to prison first. The old captain heard she was awake and came to visit, telling Rosen they would reach Monter Island in 3 days. We've been heading westward. With the steam engine, we can move quickly even against the wind. Young people nowadays are even more impressive, they can even fly in the sky, it's so cool. Is this the captain's room? Rosen needed to figure out where she was first. This is Ian's room, he went out for a smoke. Isn't he an active pilot? Can he smoke? He said he's going to resign. The captain spoke well of Ian for the first time, saying that guy may seem cold but has a kind heart. Look, he still keeps the gift I gave him when he was young. This is bioluminescent moss, it can replace oil lamps at night. He still has the telescope and maps I gave him too. As he spoke, he pointed out their current position on the map to Rosen. This was the first time Rosen learned about Ian's past from others. He was excellent as a child, but his parents died early from illness. To get away from the evil relatives who coveted his inheritance, he entered military school as soon as he was old enough. The school managed his property until he came of age. Please don't end your life. After setting up the context, the old captain held Rosen's hand and earnestly requested, Miss Rosen, you look very much like my deceased daughter. Please take care of yourself, rest a bit more. I don't think you're someone who gives up easily. Before we reach Monter Island, we still have some journey ahead. Perhaps because he lost his daughter, he shows kindness even to prisoners of the same age. Rosen watched the captain's retreating figure. Based on the information he shared, she preliminarily determined she should head east. At night, Rosen held the moss bottle that glowed like a lighthouse. She just needed to steal the keys and gun. Although the monsters in the sea were scary, just thinking about saving Emily would help her gather courage again. Because she promised to meet her again. Seeing Ian return, she wanted to fully utilize her feminine charms. But that man chose to ignore her. Were you outside the door just now? I must say you're really working hard. Shouldn't escorting prisoners be a task for your subordinates? You really underestimate your own fame. This was a direct order from the minister. Hee, I am indeed notorious, Rosen joked about herself. Are you going to send me back to prison now? Ian ignored her and prepared to lie on the sofa. Ian let her stay in his room for convenient monitoring, considering her unrecovered condition. And to guard against her, he had hidden the keys beforehand. Why don't you let me sleep on the sofa? Are you afraid I'll drag it and jump into the sea? Ian clenched his fists, feeling this was something Rosen might actually do. After all, she knew eating that fruit could be fatal, yet she still asked Henry for it. And made him an accomplice by having him feed it to her. This had angered the usually emotionally reserved person. Looking at the agitated Ian, Rosen continued to fuel the fire, trying to gain some sympathy. Performing as a cute crying girl since she'd faced death at Monter Island anyway, might as well end it all now. The angered Ian gripped Rosen's chin, saying if you keep acting up, I'll tie your limbs to the bed too. I don't understand how someone so desperate to escape would want to commit suicide. Is that even a question? It's because I know I can't escape and you keep emphasizing that. The you I know wouldn't give up even in the face of contempt. Do you really know me? Just because you read a few newspaper articles you claim to understand me. Rosen became somewhat exasperated. Ian again persuaded her to live. As long as she stayed well behaved in this room, he would remove her handcuffs. Let her stay comfortably in this room until the journey ends. Because Ian had asked the accompanying doctor earlier, Rosen's physical condition was very poor, she might even die during the journey. Even Layla begged Ian not to send her back to the cold prison yet. Ian also decided to keep her in his cabin under his personal watch. As long as she stopped being suicidal, he would give her brief freedom. Seeing her goal achieved, Rosen pretended to give up resistance, enjoying the final freedom as he wished. Got any cigarettes, alcohol, or stories? It's the last 3 days, let me have a taste. Ian respectfully offered his treasured collection. Watching her smoke. When one was finished, he gave her another. Commander Ian, I'm curious about something. She started talking to gather intelligence. Why do you smoke? Aren't pilots forbidden from smoking? Not anymore, the war is over. Why aren't you married? The war is over after all. The sudden topic change caught Ian off guard. Why are you curious about everything? This is something your fans are all curious about. During wartime, a pilot might end up dead without a trace any day. It's better not to have family. Oh, if all soldiers were like you, no one would get married. Not even a lover's photo hidden in your military cap. How pitiful. Rosen seemed to catch a slight smile at the corner of his mouth, but she was better at making the atmosphere turn cold. Were you always this boring, or is your lack of humanity different from what's advertised in the posters? If it weren't for work requirements, I never wanted to do promotions, it's too painful for me. Well, just consider it the troubles of being handsome. Ian couldn't help but laugh at Rosen's words. Startling Rosen so much she dropped her cigarette. This narcissist, did he really think he was handsome? Rosen continued chatting casually. If I were you, I'd marry 3 or 4 wives. Looking at beautiful women would make me happy. What nonsense are you talking about? The Empire has long had a one-spouse system. Rosen decided to educate this high and mighty commander about common sense. At the border, even men uglier than you have several wives. You know, I was also my husband's second wife. You should go to sleep now. Rosen moved closer voluntarily. Don't you want to hear my secrets? I've never told anyone else. Ian pushed her onto the bed, telling her to sleep obediently, but with only 3 days left, how could Rosen sleep? How could she find opportunities without continuing the conversation? She shook her restless little hand. Why don't you handcuff me? We'll talk about that when you're sleeping. Are you not sleeping or can't sleep? Both, I guess, she said, and he gave her an extra teddy bear. This is from Layla. I can't sleep either. Anyway, we still have 3 days. There'll be plenty of time to sleep later. She held Ian's hand. Just listen to my story from my perspective. It doesn't matter if you don't believe it, I'm over anyway. Seeing Ian acquiesce to her actions, Rosen started telling her story from when she was 15. I stayed in an orphanage for 15 years. They didn't treat me as human. But I wouldn't let them have their way. Since I was already getting hit, I had to do something to get back at them, otherwise it would be too unfair. There, even when sick, we had to work. Until one day, I glimpsed happiness. So the word love didn't just exist in picture books. I also wanted someone to hug me and tell me I love you. Right after turning 15, I was sold as a concubine to a 40-year-old man. And she was overjoyed, thinking she had found happiness. The man looked her up and down like merchandise, first concerned about whether she could bear children. After receiving repeated assurance from the orphanage director, he took Rosen home. Rosen was very grateful to this person who pulled her out of misery. Just 2 weeks later, the man started complaining about her bad cooking and began hitting her. Rosen endured it all to avoid returning to the orphanage. Until 2 months later, a strange woman came to the door, and she learned she was a concubine. And this husband's daughter was the same age as her. Emily shouted at her father, "My mother helped you brew medicine until her magic was depleted. She was beaten and fell ill. Now you've brought home another child." But the necklace on her neck could suppress magic power. Her complaints only earned her a beating. That night Rosen kindly came to secretly bring medicine, but was met with mockery. Did that old man give you jewels or pretty dresses? Tricking you into jumping into the fire pit too. I just wanted a home, at least I don't have to worry about being sold somewhere. And I don't have to huddle in a cold room enduring beatings. At least you who have family have no right to judge me. The next day Sindren was like a different person, kindly greeting Rosen good morning. What about Emily? Rosen couldn't help asking, worried that her harsh words yesterday might have been reported. You must have been scared yesterday. If she hadn't tried to use magic against me, I wouldn't have hit her. This was the first time Rosen heard about the existence of magic. She's a witch, inherited her mother's abilities. She wears the necklace locked up because she can't handle her own power. I'm just protecting her. Don't feel bad about being a second wife, you're the only one I like now. You're a good girl, right? As long as you're obedient, I won't lay a hand on you. He gently brainwashed Rosen. Rosen also liked Sindren and liked this warm home. So she didn't take occasional friction to heart. Emily will stay here temporarily, she wants to earn money for her mother's medical bills. If her mother came to work for me, the house would surely be in chaos. But if two wives fought over me, that would be nice too. Hearing Emily would stay, Rosen worried more about losing her place to stay than being jealous of the first wife's existence. She realized then that she didn't love this man, but rather the house that could shelter her from wind and rain. The next day, Rosen questioned Emily, who was doing laundry. Why did you make me breakfast? Could it be you like me? Or is it because you feel guilty? Emily wouldn't admit that she wanted to apologize for saying harsh words last night. She just acted tough, saying she had extra food so she made some, besides it was for Sindren, it had nothing to do with you. Anyway, I can't finish it all. If I eat too much, Sindren will surely complain I'm fat. What? He has the nerve to say that about you? He does nothing all day except eat. Finally, in complaining about Sindren, the two girls found common ground. Emily, I heard you're a witch, is that true? Rosen was curious. Why does a witch still do housework by hand? Shouldn't things just move by themselves with a whoosh? Storybook witches are omnipotent, but you can't use magic because of a necklace? To not disappoint Rosen, she decided to show a little magic to maintain the witch's reputation. Why do you want to see such things? Empire citizens all avoid them. Even staying by Sindren's side is just seeking protection. Although it's annoying, we can't live independently. But this reason couldn't stop Rosen's enthusiasm. That's magic. I've never seen a witch before, I really want to see. Emily waved her hand, and the clothes automatically wrung themselves dry in the air. This spectacular moment became unforgettable for Rosen, and was the only spice in her hard life. That night, when the air raid siren sounded with no men at home, the two scared girls only calmed down after hearing Ian's voice on the radio. I am Ian, commander of the Liaton Flight Squad. Please secure your doors and windows, take your valuables and hide in the basement. Our flight squad will do our utmost to protect everyone's safety. Ian looked at the prisoner who had talked herself to sleep before him. The person he once vowed to protect would now be delivered to death by his own hands. At this moment, Ian remained highly vigilant, constantly reminding himself that this was a prisoner skilled at lying. She was still hinting that she didn't kill the person. If she had said these things in court, they would say she killed her husband because she couldn't endure domestic violence. I've removed your handcuffs, why don't you sleep in a more comfortable position? Ian checked her breathing with his finger to confirm Rosen was really asleep. He caressed Rosen's cheek, somewhat regretting taking on the task of escorting her. Because he was also the person the Empire most hoped would let her escape. Ian mumbled quietly, what should I do with you? I really hope your lies could fool me. Ian was woken up the next day by Henry. For the first time he hadn't used sleep-inducing aromatherapy and didn't have nightmares. The first thing he did upon opening his eyes was ask what time it was. But Henry didn't care about that. Most importantly, he was lying in bed with a female prisoner. What did you two do last night? She crawled into your bed, right? Right? Now it was his turn to suspect his commander of impropriety. I crawled in myself, Ian admitted helplessly. Are you crazy? Henry felt he was going crazy. You're not what I'm thinking, right? Not what you're thinking. Ian got up, with a fly still following him around demanding explanations. But Ian suddenly couldn't remember what to say. Don't worry needlessly, we're both fully clothed. And my words about keeping 1 meter distance from her, did you treat them as wind in your ears? Now Henry didn't care about the safety distance issue, still pursuing the question, do you like her? Otherwise, why sleep in the same room while wearing handcuffs? Ian insisted it was just for surveillance. He stopped Henry from wanting to handcuff Rosen. She has an extreme personality, continuing to restrain her might lead to another suicide attempt. I promised to let her free within my sight. She also promised to stay. Henry disagreed with his commander's explanation. How could she commit suicide while handcuffed? Until Ian reminded him that Rosen was handcuffed while eating yesterday. Thinking about how he had brought the tomatoes to the table himself, Henry stopped talking. I came to relay a message from the captain. He said there's a large group of magical beasts ahead that might block our path. I heard magical beasts usually avoid large ships. If necessary, we can deviate from the route a bit. At worst, it would only delay the journey by a day or two, so if there's a delay, we need to report to superiors. After chasing Henry out, Ian looked at Rosen on the bed. She could live 1 or 2 more days. He sat back down by the bed, pretending to have just woken up. Waking her up to drink. The clear sky suddenly became cloudy. Rosen didn't get her drink. Instead, Henry came, worried about his commander. He played chess with Rosen and kept winning. This made Rosen even more upset. She kicked over the chessboard, saying that play this noble's entertainment with me is really annoying. You should leave, I need to rest. The cabin is already narrow and 2 big guys crowding me, plus this game is so boring. Henry thought she was trying to get rid of him so they could have time alone. Of course he wouldn't leave. Rosen was puzzled. Why did Henry insist on staying to eat and play together as soon as she opened her eyes? Was this some new form of interrogation? I won't leave, and I definitely won't leave you 2 alone. Rosen thought he was staying to prevent her escape. You don't trust me, but don't you trust your superior? Indeed, since this morning, Henry had lost trust in his commander. Rosen was somewhat angry. How could she get information from Ian if she couldn't be alone with him? So she cried and made a fuss about going to the deck for some air. I'll be good and I'm already clean. Even if we meet people, just cover my face, just a little while. You told me yesterday you wanted to eat something and said you'd be fine, but you tried to commit suicide. How can I trust you? How strange, don't you want me dead? This would be good for you. Henry the vice captain had no way with her, asking his commander for help. How about I take her to the deck, just for a while then come back? But the commander told him to go get some wine from the storage. Although this had nothing to do with going to the deck, Henry still did as told. Because this was what the commander had promised Rosen earlier. What's wrong with him today? He seems different from before. Is he angry? He's always been like this. His personality is like an untamed young colt. Ian's metaphor seemed very apt to Rosen, but you're indeed officer material. You've got him under tight control. Of course I have to watch him closely. After all, besides him, I've lost everyone else. Rosen moved closer to him. I've told you my story. Isn't it unfair that you won't tell me yours? She deliberately stepped on his shoe, creating physical contact. You dislike me but understand me well, while I like you but know nothing about you. Rosen snatched the old newspaper from his hand. You've read this so many times, why not play with me instead? Ian looked at this woman, wondering what tricks she was trying to play. Rosen had started to understand this man. Acting clingy like a child was effective with him. When Rosen learned he was only 30 and had become a commander at 20, she was completely shocked. Do you have some secret to quick promotion? Because everyone above ran away, and the Air Force was already short-staffed. Most were sent to the border and capital. In Lyatun, only military school students remained. From our batch, only Henry and I are still alive. Ian unconsciously revealed quite a bit. Rosen only then realized that 10 years ago they were protected by a group of students. I'm sorry for cursing your colleagues before. I was thoughtless, but Ian said he should apologize. Seeing him apologize, Rosen began to comfort him. You just think too much, that's why you can't sleep at night. No need to apologize to a criminal like me, you could live more easily. Why are you saying such things to me? Hearing words of comfort from an adversary made him somewhat confused. Of course it's because I like you, so I hope you'll feel better. The sudden confession made Ian frown. What, did my words upset you? Rosen closed the distance between them. But the man in front of her stepped back again. I don't deserve to hear such words from you, it feels somewhat awkward. You seem to have forgotten what our relationship is. Rosen grabbed his hand and continued to tease. Seeing his hand suddenly raise, she worried she had gone too far and would get hit. Seeing no reaction, she couldn't help but push further, reaching out to touch his face. Suddenly her hand was caught. Rosen laughed awkwardly. Haha, sorry, couldn't help it. Just wanted to touch you once, you look just like in the posters. Consider it fulfilling a dying person's wish. She continued to explain, I used to collect your posters and put them on my wall. My husband was jealous of your looks, so he beat and scolded me. Said someone like me couldn't even touch your toes. Looks like being a famous criminal isn't so bad. Not only can I sit face to face with you, I can even touch your face. Ian couldn't help himself and touched her back. The atmosphere between them suddenly became somewhat ambiguous, but was broken by an adorable little girl. Layla, hearing Rosen was awake, came excitedly to invite her to a party. Since being saved by Rosen, she liked her even more and was very concerned about her health. Faced with this girl's kindness, Rosen felt warm inside. She couldn't help but hug her and stroke her face. As a prisoner, it had been a long time since she felt someone else's warmth. Layla, hearing that Rosen's hands had been freed, came specifically to invite her to the evening deck party. However, Rosen was still self-aware. Although this would be a good opportunity to scout the quays and lifeboat locations. As a prisoner, she probably shouldn't join others at a party. Rosen looked outside where it was still drizzling. Asked if the party would proceed normally in this weather. But Layla had confidence in her grandfather's words. My grandfather said the rain will stop by evening, his predictions have never been wrong. Plus today is Witches' Night, a famous winter festival. The ship will also hold a party. After all, the prisoners are only in the lowest level of the ship. The deck can host parties for tourist passengers. Layla chatted non-stop, introducing the party's programs, sincerely inviting Rosen to attend. Henry picked up his little niece, intending to tell her Rosen's status was inappropriate, but was lectured by his niece, who thought interrupting others was rude. Are you going to ignore Rosen again because she doesn't understand parties? Henry's eyes drifted to his commander. Rosen was too famous, everyone on the ship would recognize her. Layla still knew who was in charge here. She ran to Ian to seek his approval. The old captain had considered Henry's concerns, so tonight was a masquerade ball. As long as Rosen wore a mask, no one would recognize her. Ian could be her dance partner while keeping watch. Rosen was also thinking about how to talk her way into getting out. Unexpectedly, Ian asked her directly if she wanted to attend. Really? A pleasantly surprised Rosen felt her ears must be playing tricks. Even if Henry objected further, it wouldn't matter. Ian had already given her many privileges, what's one more? Finally able to watch fireworks and eat food with Rosen. Rosen looked out the window, the rain had indeed stopped. She felt some anticipation for tonight's party. Witches' Night is the birthday of all witches. The first time she heard Emily say this day was her birthday, Rosen was a bit annoyed she hadn't mentioned it earlier. That's when she learned from Emily that this day was all witches' birthday. And witches weren't born witches. Witch power was fair, not inherited through bloodlines. This power, which only manifests in women, frightened people. So once discovered, they were hunted down. Rosen's first witches' night was spent with Emily. While the bastard man wasn't home, they made cake together to celebrate. She didn't understand why Emily, with all her knowledge and magic, still relied on Sindren instead of escaping. Even with a sick mother and a necklace restraining her magic, she could live well with just a little magic. Why don't you use magic to heal others? No one would know it was your doing now. If people saw you using magic to help them, they would be happy, right? That thinking is dangerous, Emily warned her. Never let others know you're a witch. The last witch who revealed her abilities died horribly. She felt the current situation was fine. Even if one person can't save the world, they can share methods with ordinary people. Emily took advantage of Sindren's absence to teach Rosen some knowledge. But since neither could read, she could only teach life skills. So Rosen's whole world was no longer just Sindren. Emily became her only family. Emily, you say witches aren't inherited through blood, so what are the conditions for becoming a witch? One person's blood, one wish, one spell, but since this was just passed down information, Emily wasn't clear on the specifics either. She put the finished cake in front of Rosen. There's a rumor that if you make a wish on cake during Witches' Night, witches will grant your wish. Although Rosen never had cake before. She had always hoped someone would give her a warm embrace. Now that wish had come true. However, her wish for Sindren not to return tonight didn't come true. Desperately, that winter, under Sindren's coercion, Rosen became pregnant. The scene switches back to the cabin, where she dismissed all the maids. And dressed herself in front of Ian. Her frail figure seemed to remind Ian, how could such a small frame overpower a grown man? Looking at her scarred back, it was clear how many beatings she had endured. Rosen held up clothes, asking him which looked better. Although he offered constructive suggestions, Rosen had no intention of listening. She chose a blue dress herself. The news never mentioned your beatings. Even her husband's information was glossed over, that 40-year-old kind doctor from the slums. Back then people were eager to execute the witch, showing no concern for her tragic background. You should have told the court about the domestic violence. Although the verdict would have been unfavorable, at least you wouldn't be labeled a witch. Ian's suggestion was meaningless. Rosen, used to being hated, no longer wanted their understanding. Everyone wanted to execute her immediately. How would they allow her to defend herself? But why are you suddenly thinking from my perspective? Earlier, no matter how I tried to seduce you, you were cold as stone. Were you moved after hearing my story last night? Rosen struggled with the dress zipper, asking Ian nearby to help. I heard party escorts take care of their partners. Surely you can help with this small favor? Ian knelt down, helping her tie a pretty butterfly bow. Looking at her scarred back, he couldn't help but be stunned. Hey, you're not feeling sorry for me, are you?